Hello and welcome once again to Hot Issues. The Supreme Court on February 28 this year outlawed the fast-track High Court by a majority decision of 5-4. But sitting again on June 26, again this year, restored the fast-track High Court, this time by a 6-5 majority decision. For the rest of the story, the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, Nana Akufo-Addo, is in the studio. Nana, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Was the review necessary at all?
Oh, but it's quite clear that the review was necessary. First of all, what happened in court yesterday, today's Thursday, has vindicated the decision that the President made on the advice of the Judicial Council to appoint the 11th judge onto the court. Why do I say so? All through the time the court has been exercising this review jurisdiction, there's almost no instance where the members of the court that heard the original case have ever changed their minds. And you will notice that yesterday, the 5-4 division that pertained in the first case pertained yesterday. So if we had gone to a court that was composed of the original panel, clearly there would have been a failure of justice. I mean, all that would have happened would have been people repeating their entrenched positions. That is why the Constitution has insisted that when it comes to reviews, since the court normally sits in panels of 5, that at least 7 judges should sit. This is to provide the opportunity for 2 fresh minds to come onto the court and, if you like, tilt the matter one way or another in terms of finality. That's exactly what happened. So I think it's very important that at the time when the President was being attacked for attempting to interfere in the affairs of the judiciary, he was in fact acting in the public interest to make sure that this very important decision of the Supreme Court did not end up in a failure of justice. I think he's to be commended for it. And who did he appoint? The 2 fresh judges that came on the court.
Justice Afreh and Lamte.
Justice Lamte and Afreh, Lamte Senior. So
right.
we mentioned his name first.
What a legal
in
right.
our profession. Senior in the Supreme Court. Justice Lamte was appointed by President Rawlings. In fact, in the opposition of some of us in the Parliament. And Justice Afreh was appointed by President Kufuor. If the origin of your appointment as a judge to the Supreme Court determines your reaction to all cases, we shouldn't even have had a vote in this court, because virtually everybody on that court, with the exception of Mr. Justice Afreh, was appointed by President Rawlings in one way or another, either as chairman of the PNDC or as a member, or as president of the Fourth Republic. In one or two, there are 3 or 4 who were rushed onto the court, Mr. Justice Ampia, Pega, etc., just before the Fourth Republic.
Are you justifying claims that he also rushed Justice Afreh?
No, I'm not just. I'm just explaining that who appoints you in the conduct of the Supreme Court is usually irrelevant. They're going there to determine matters of constitutional propriety. That's what they go there to do. And they look at the matters on their merits. And the point I'm trying to make is that these 2 fresh minds that came onto the court, one appointed by President Rawlings, one appointed by President Kufuor, both of them agreed that what the majority had sought to do, what the original majority had sought to do in the original decision, was wholly erroneous, fundamentally flawed. Mr. Justice Afreh used the word woeful to describe the case of the plaintiff. And I have no doubt in my mind that the decision that the Supreme Court originally pronounced was a decision that was perverse. I think it was one of the worst decisions that have come from that court. And legal scholars, when they come to make the analysis, will see that it was a decision founded on very little basis, and a great deal of artificial scholarship was employed to arrive at a decision. What is the decision? What exactly is at issue in this case? What is at issue in this case is, in the conduct of the affairs of the judiciary, should an outside force like Parliament have a say in the matter?
No, but let's zero in on the case of Justice Afreh, for instance, because the contention of the minority, if I may specifically speak about the NDC, is that this was a man who sat as a judge in one of the fast-track high courts, and that he had been appointed by the President. His appointment ran through, literally. You don't think such a man owed allegiance to the President and had to necessarily give a judgment to favor?
What kind of allegiance? This Afreh is one of the most distinguished jurists in this country's history. He's an extremely eminent academic lawyer, who has also now distinguished himself as a judge in the Court of Appeal. There is not an individual in the legal profession who has any knowledge of this matter that would question the credibility or the fitness of Mr. Justice Afre to be in the Supreme Court. He should have been there 3 or 4 years ago. But insofar as the NDC preferred judges like Ajowi to be on the Supreme Court, of course, they didn't have any opportunity to promote it. There is nobody of any merit or standing in the legal profession who would have any quarrel. And indeed, at the time of the nomination process in Parliament, the NDC spokesman who attempted this half-hearted boycott of his nomination process were clear in their mind that they had no doubt, I speak of Babin, Honorable Babin, and the rest, they had no doubt about the fitness of Afre to be on the court.
The question is not about his fitness, the question about
what... No, it's important, because we're talking about a judge who is going to write things which is going to be recorded, like his judgment of yesterday.
Right.
If that judgment, if somebody can come and tell me that that judgment was in some way skewed or perverse or erroneous, then the question of allegiances and stuff would come. But if you read and listen to the judgment, and it may be that at the end of the day, that will be the most luminous judgment of the various decisions that were given on the court, you will then note that this is a man who's expressing his mind. This has not been a man who has made any career of kowtowing to anybody in this country. The fact, somebody has to appoint a judge. Do I, every time I go to the Supreme Court, do I have to object to the presence of Justices Bamfordado, Ampia, Pega, Ajabeng?
Why do you mention them in particular?
I mention it because they were appointed by President Rawlings. Would that be a proper way for me to, merely because on a constitutional case they happen to have been appointed by a political opponent? Does that make them liable? Must I therefore see that everything that they do, unless, of course, we're being told that the original decision itself was politically motivated, and that therefore any attempt must also be by political process. I'm not prepared to go through. All I know is that it was important that the review panel have an opinion. This is a case. How important is this matter? This court came into being in March 2001.
Now hold on, fire. Let's take one break. When we come back, we continue from there. Welcome back to Hot Issues. Nana, do you find the decision yesterday a victory for yourself?
No, I don't look at these matters that way. And I don't look at this as a victory for the MPP, myself. I don't see it that way. If anything else at all, it's a victory for due process and constitutional development in our country. When this thing happened, the president made it clear that he thought the decision was wrong. I went on the air to say that we're entitled to our views. We are citizens of this country, even if we're in office. We're entitled to our views of what the courts do, just as any other citizen of this country. We did not employ any underhand methods. We went about it by all legal means available to us. I indicated to the world that I was applying for a review. I filed my papers. And the matter has been done in all rectitude and in consonance with all the requirements of due process. One thing which faced us was here was a court of 10 people. And remember that but for the illness of Mr. Justice Lamte at the material time, Ajowi would not have sat on that court. And the decision, clearly, from what Lamte said yesterday, would have been different from what it originally was. If it had been a split of 5, it would have been 5-4 in my favor, as it were, if indeed Lamte had been there. It's important to remember that, because people are speaking as if somehow or other this whole thing, but he happened not to be there. But we recognize that there were 10 people on the court. 10 people could not give a decision that would be satisfactory for anybody in this country to understand. It's necessary for the court always to sit in odd numbers. And there was the basis of the Judicial Council's request to the President that it was necessary, in order not to have a failure of justice in this matter, that an 11th judge should be appointed so that the court would have these 2 fresh minds to look at the matter. And when you look at the decision of the court, it is the 2 fresh minds that have swayed the decision, necessarily. That's how it always is.
Why wasn't the original figure of 9 maintained, for instance?
What would have been the purpose? If you heard of what they did yesterday. The 5 said that their decision was not attackable.
So that presupposes that the extra 2 minds were predetermined then?
Not predetermined. They would come and decide. They could come and support the majority. They could come and support the minority. They happened to come and say that what the majority had done was valueless. They didn't, that option, until I went into court to hear them, all of us were on tenterhooks yesterday. as to what finally, because by the time Mr. Justice Alfred came to give his decision, as the Chief Justice quite correctly pointed out, it was 5-5. I didn't know. I had no idea which way the decision would come until the judge opened his mouth and began to give his ruling. But that is always what happens on the review. There's nothing peculiar about the expanding of the court for the review that I would challenge anybody to come forward with facts that show that the Supreme Court, ever since it's entertained this power of review in 1988 in the Fosuhene and Pomar case, to come and show evidence that the same 5 or 7 judges that heard a particular case are the same who do it on review.
Now let me read a paragraph from a press statement issued by the opposition NDC for you. There is no constitutional requirement that there must be a panel of 11 to review a decision of a panel of 9.
That is the sort
and then
of
they go ahead to say that the Judicial Council, which allegedly advised in quotes the President on Justice Alfred's nomination, is chaired by the Chief Justice and was convened by him.
These institutions these are state institutions, constitutional bodies. The Chief Justice is ex officio. Chief Justice is appointed as Chief Justice with unanimity of support in Parliament, both the majority and the minority, NDC, PNC, CPP, MPP, everybody concurred. Indeed, we had glowing statements of his performance from leaders of the opposition in the Parliament. At the time when it matters whether he should be Chief Justice or not, they had no difficulty in accepting his fitness to be Chief Justice. Does he have a personal interest in these matters? Whether or not a system of automated adjudication in our country succeeds, works, is necessary for our country, do you think that the Chief Justice has some kind of personal proprietary interest in it? It is his view that the public interest is advanced by having a more efficient judicial administration system. And that is the only basis on which this matter. None of us have a personal interest. If indeed the court has outlawed the automation process in our country, we live with it. Lawyers, citizens who respect the law. The Chief Justice...
Wouldn't it have been a defeat for you?
How would it be a defeat? That the court has pronounced on a constitutional matter. I've been to that court and I've had several decisions gone against me. I continue to be a lawyer and
you were by then not the Justice Minister.
And even if I'm the Justice Minister, I will be surprised, however long the President decides to keep me in this office, that every single case that I take to court I'll win. I will be surprised. There will be a case, at least one, that I'm bound to lose. And I think that is in the nature of things. I don't think that we have to worry ourselves about these. Let us look at the substance of what's going on. What is it being said? That a system whereby automation and mechanical processes are brought to assist in the administration of justice is in some way a threat to the individual liberties of our people.
Is that a perception of a section of the population?
Well, I think that the whole of this case, you see, doesn't have anything to do with the fast-track court, insofar as it delivers on civil matters. Can you imagine? Since this court was created in 2001, the division of this court came into being. The fast-track division of the High Court came into being in 2001. My understanding is that as of February this year, 193 suits had been filed in that court. And can you believe it? 72 of them had already been disposed of. It is unprecedented in our national history to have litigation being disposed of at that rate. Within a year, 72 cases of 193 writs that had been filed had been disposed of. That's not the problem that the NDC had. Their problem is clear.
What is their problem?
Victor Salome and the other trials of their leaders that are taking place in the fast-track High Court, and their perception that somehow or other that process is going too fast. I'm astonished. I would have thought that anybody who believes is innocent of particular charges would be glad to have his innocence established as quickly as possible. Take the case of the former head of the Ghana Investment Center, the youngest of the Ahoy,
yes,
Kwesi Ahoy.
Mr. Kwesi Ahoy.
Isn't Kwesi Ahoy in a better position today? That very, very quickly, within a month or two of these proceedings coming before him, the court had all the material which was able to tell him, no, there's no charge being made against you.
The problem is fast track.
But I'm asking.
Why do you say fast track? Couldn't you have tried them in the traditional courts?
They are the traditional
Expeditiously
courts.
as well?
But they are the traditional courts. It's a nickname that is being given to them. They are the traditional courts, employing the same rules of procedure, being presided over. These are not courts presided over by masked judges at Burma camp, like we saw in the so-called revolutionary courts that were the darling of our opponents. These are not those type of courts of judges sitting in masked and pronouncing revolutionary justice in 30 minutes and decreeing sentences of 20, 25 years, 50 years, and the sequestration of people's properties. That is not the type. These are courts manned by superior court judges who have taken the oath to do justice without ill will or favor, are applying the normal rules of procedure, but able to deliver justice quicker. Hence fast track.
Will you maintain the name fast track?
Oh, I don't see any difficulty with that. The Old Bailey. Have you heard of the Old Bailey? Have you heard of the Old Bailey? The Old Bailey is probably the most famous court in the world. It's the criminal court in England. That's his nickname. That has no foundation in any law or statute. The Central High Court, the criminal court in England should be so described. But that is the nickname. And it has stuck.
Now let's take another break. Welcome back to Hot Issues. Dana, the NDC again has a problem with Justice Lamte. Let me read a paragraph to you. On Monday, June 3, 2002, Mr. Justice Lamte, who had not participated in the 5-4 decision, turned 70 years. According to Article 1452 of the Constitution, quote, a justice of the Superior Court or a chairman of a regional tribunal shall vacate his office, A, in the case of a justice of a Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal on attaining the age of 70 years. Justice Lamte is 70. Why did you have him there?
The hearing of the review application came before the Supreme Court on the 28th of May. That was when the court actually heard and made whatever consequential orders it had to make on the review application. It is true he was not a part of the original panel, but as I explained to you, new judges are usually brought on the review panel, and he was on the review panel on the day in which the review case, because the review case came up for hearing just once, and that was on the 28th of May. The Constitution makes it quite clear that once you have begun particular proceedings, you are entitled to sit there for 6 months, an extra 6 months, to be able to complete the work of those proceedings or deliver judgment, whichever is the case. That's exactly what happened. There's absolutely there's nothing. And these are matters that the courts have already pronounced themselves upon. And that is why, when Professor Dankwa got up to try and object to Justice Lamte, both the Chief Justice and Mr. Justice Kwega were quick to let him know that the point he was about to urge on the court was jejune and of absolutely no merit and valueless, because the matter had already been disposed of by them. These are very simple matters. Make the calculation. A case comes before the judge before he's 70. The Constitution, recognizing that this situation can sometimes occur, say that once he has begun the case, you allow him to complete it, and you give him a 6-month leeway to do it. And I'm not the one who allowed him on the court. I do not impanel the Supreme Court. That is the Chief Justice. And he did so recognizing fully well that there was constitutional warrant and sanction for what he had done.
Between February, when the courts were outlawed, till yesterday, June 26, when another decision reversed it, have we lost anything?
Oh, we've lost all these cases that have been stymied in the court. Are there. There've been no progress. The whole matter has been frozen until this review could be completed. Clearly, the public interest has suffered from that, insofar as it has accentuated the delays in the administration of justice, and that clearly is a matter that is not in the public interest. Fortunately, the Supreme Court, and can you imagine what I thought was so extraordinarily pathetic about the original decision of the Supreme Court? At this time in the world, all of us are trying to get on the information highway. Even those of us who are notoriously computer literate are making valiant efforts to enter the 21st century. And that courts, which have been criticized for perennial delays, that has been a criticism of our system of judicial administration ever since I came to the bar in Ghana in the mid-70s, that today efforts are being made by the administrators of the system to mechanize the system and therefore speed it up and therefore deliver justice quickly. Because a handful of individuals are having to answer before this quicker process acts of potential malfeasance, the entire public interest should be subjugated to, because at the end of the day, when you listen to them carefully, they're not concerned about the civil jurisdiction of this court. Chekata himself, when he went to the court, his original plea was that it had no power to try criminal matters. Yes, it has power to do civil cases, but doesn't have power to do criminal cases. It's an unheard of piece of jurisprudential argument in our country.
But
the High Court.
Why do you have a lot of former politicians appearing before the fast-track High Courts?
I think that it is in everybody's interest that these accusations of malfeasance and corruption be established one way or another as quickly as possible. And the decision that the Chief Justice took in the public interest was that cases involving significant sums of money, they're not all cases, they're cases, the case on the Quality Grain at loss is allegedly of $11 million. In the case of Victor Salome, he was convicted by that court. It was over $1 million. It's a substantial sums of public monies are at stake in the particular criminal prosecution. That is when it will be ready for examination by the so-called fast-track High Court. I cannot see that this can be in anything other than the interest of the majority of the people of this country. That allegations are made about political leaders having engaged in either acts of corruption or malfeasance, and that the public has an opportunity to have these matters determined quickly. Those who are innocent proclaim they're innocent and walk with their heads high, that they have met these accusations and have defeated them, and that those who are guilty are dealt with as expeditiously as possible. I cannot see that this can be anything than advancing the public interest in this country. Would we prefer to have a situation where these trials of the people who are found to have been engaged in all kinds of corrupt or irregular activities go on ad infinitum, like some kind of long-standing soap opera? I don't think that the public interest is best served.
Now, how would you have felt had Justice Afre ruled against the restoration of the courts?
What would I have felt? I would have said to myself, it's a pity. I thought I had a good case, but I've lost. This is what every lawyer feels, and you go on and organize yourself accordingly. I mean, these matters, that's the thing about litigation. And that's one of the few pieces of advice. My father was very reluctant, even though he was himself a very good lawyer, a very famous lawyer, to give me any advice about what to do. But the one thing he said is that in litigation, understand, you never know what will be the outcome.
So when will the courts be up and running? The fast-track High Court?
That one is a matter for the Chief Justice. Hopefully it will be, we'll get the whole thing back immediately after the holidays. Hopefully at the beginning of July, they'll start running again. But I think what it is extremely important for the Ghanaian people to seize is, first of all, the system that we're attempting to develop. That system says that certain issues are left for the determination of the judges. The judges have, after a great deal of consideration both ways, have considered their matter and they have come to a conclusion. Just as in the American example, when the presidency of the United States was at stake. A great deal of argument was made about the propriety of the intervention of the Supreme Court, the kind of people who had been appointed to the Supreme Court being of a certain political color, and that would all influence the decision. At the end of the day, when the Supreme Court pronounced on the matter in finality, the matter was brought to a rest.
So it means the fast-track courts are here with us. They can never be proscribed by anything anymore.
Well, the legal ingenuity, of course, is seamless. I mean, I don't know whatever other things are being contemplated. But I think that too much fuss is being made about this matter. We ought to be very, very, very clear in our mind that automation, mechanization, improving the quality of judicial administration is the road we should take.
Nana, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is very grateful to have you here. We've been listening to Attorney General and Minister of Justice Nana Akufo-Addo speaking on the decision of the Supreme Court 6-5 restoring the fast-track High Court. Good night.